Shalom, shalom, everyone, and thank you for joining the House of Shiloh Ministries. To continue in the lesson series that we've called the FAQs, and it's the frequently asked questions and contradictions that the church has created for us as we grew up in Christianity. The purpose of this lesson is to bring light to those contradictions and answer or provide a solution that the scriptures present in truth to why the church teaches this and teaches so wrong. There's history involved with that and everything. And we've gone through quite a bit. We're in part 22. This is sponsored by Shiloh Ministries and presented by yours truly, Brother Andrew Bradley. What we've talked about previously is history and location and old books and stuff like that, resources that date back 200 to 300, 400, 500 years. Even further, they're going back to the 10th century, where they speak of where the Hebrews were at that time and what they looked like. So we have a lot of amazing history that we've already talked about and a lot of scripture. This lesson is quite long, being that it's in part 22. Now, one of the ways to find out where the people are at, you look at the very old books that date back at least, I would say, 1850 and back. But another great way, and you can do this with modern books, that tells the truth of who the people are. All you got to do is look at language. Language tends to change, but not completely. It keeps its roots. And when you have a people that are established in a location, they can tell you their location, they've been in their location 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 years, and they speak the language they've been speaking to for so long. You're going to realize you can track their history through language. So we're going to move on and show some language comparisons. All right, historical witness of the real Israel. The church believes that Israel is lost and no one knows where they are, or the Jews we see in the modern state of Israel is indeed Israel, or a piece of Israel. The tribe of Judah, they like to claim. Let's use language, though. Language is another witness to whom a people are. And one of the large groups of languages in Africa, one of the largest, might be the largest, because it takes up a huge portion of Africa, is the Bantu languages. There are many dialects, just like you have dialects in English. If you went to Scotland, Ireland, and England, all three sound different. And for an American English speaker, you will have trouble understanding them half the time, especially a Scottish or an Irish, because their dialect is so different. It's a struggle. It's a struggle to understand. You have this in the Bantu languages as well. The dialects can be quite different, and even among themselves, they can struggle to understand, but it still comes from the same family. That language goes from the slave coast all the way to the south. So Bantu covers the majority of Africa, the language family. It is believed that the Bantu languages are Proto-Hebrew in origin. This is fascinating. And later on in the lesson, we'll speak to an actual linguistic person. I'm sorry. That word is very hard for me to pronounce. Who is a scholar and has done studies into this. And he is a Jewish scholar by that fact. So let's look at some words that are similar to Hebrew that you'll find in the Bantu family. And we've got quite a few of these, and I love them because it's so startling. And we're going to talk also about how this cannot be coincidental, by the way. Some people are going to say, oh, well, they just have two words that just sound like each other. But there is a correlation of possibility. There's a mathematical formula that they can use to show you how probable that a word sounds the same, spelt the same, and mean the same in languages that are completely unrelated and separated by thousands of miles. Very improbable, right? So you have the word Bena, son, in the Bantu, and Ben, son, in Hebrew. In Bantu, you have the word Mai, water. In Hebrew, Mayim. In the Bantu language, you have Tondo, I'm sorry. And in Hebrew, it's Toda, which means thanks. All right, very, very similar. Okay, anybody want to add to this? Any questions so far? No, we're going to keep going. We got more words to share. We have the Bantu here, which is sika or saka, which is to play. And the Hebrew word is sakak, which means to laugh, mock, or play. In the Bantu, you have Yah-Abe, which is Elohim or God in English. Similar to Ab-Yah, which is Father Yah. We also normally say Abba-Yah, but Abba is Aramaic, which is a close cousin to the ancient Hebrew anyway, or the older Hebrew anyway. So you'll see Abba-Yah. So where you get similar to Yah-Abba or Abe. Very similar, correct? And Aramaic was a very common language during the life of Yahusha. This is just a tip of the iceberg. If anybody has anything to add or any questions, I know this is just simply information and it's pretty straightforward. But if you want to say something, just let me know. So I'm gonna just keep on going. Bantu word, Ime no Allah. Allah or God is within. Hebrew, Emmanuel. With us is God or Elohim or Allah. Very, very, very simple. Because the Bantu languages uses single syllables that are individual words that come together to make a single word that makes a group or a phrase. Very much like Hebrew. So when we read, hallelujah in the English text, that is multiple Hebrew syllables or phrases or words being brought together to make a longer word, which is actually a sentence if you translate it right in the English. All right, Bantu, Elu, which is up, height, above, upon. And in Hebrew, it's Ilu. Very similar, which is above, over, upon, or against. In the Bantu, Ani is we. In the Hebrew, Ani is we. In English, we say Ani, but it's Ani. In the Bantu, Bana, children. Hebrew, Bana, children. Bantu, Yapala. It is too hard. You ought to give it up or give up on it. And then Pala, to be great, difficult, or to be too hard. It goes on and on. There's so many of these examples. Here's the Bantu, Zara or Zala, to increase, full, give birth, fruitful. In the Hebrew, you have Zara, to sow, to become pregnant. Same meaning. Bantu, Yara or Yala, instruct. Hebrew, Yara, to point out, to teach. It's extraordinary. And what's really cool about the Bantu languages is that you'll find the Hebrew similarities in the Bantu languages around Mali, and Niger, Burkina Faso, and then you'll go to Zululand and find a Bantu language there that will have different Hebrew words still being retained. They may not share the same with these, for example, but all over throughout the dialects, you'll pull all these different Hebrew similarities. People underestimate how many millions of people have the Bantu dialect and have Hebraic ancestry, and they just do not realize it. The Igbo alone are in the tens of millions. Now imagine you got all those other groups. It's a huge group of people. Bantu, Te, mouth. Hebrew, the mouth. Bantu, Torah. I love this definition. To hit a target with an arrow. I love that definition. Why? Because anybody that knows the Hebrew word for Torah and sin and righteousness is to hit the mark. And the mark is Torah. So this definition is right on with the Hebraic understanding. And Torah, to throw, to point the way. One is to walk in life. In the KJV, look, to teach, shoot, archer, cast, teacher. I love that. This is when it's so strong of a correlation. You can't say that's coincidental. You cannot say that. You'll have to be really purposely ignoring what's in front of you to say that this is not something that's truly related. So as we go through these examples, what I want people to understand is that if you want to know how Proto-Hebrew sounded like, listen to the Bantu languages when they speak. That's an extraordinary statement. What I'm trying to get people to understand is Africa holds the key to our understanding of how the ancient Hebrews spoke. How did they sound? How did their tones sound? How did they pronounce the letters and the way their words were formed? Listen to the West African. You're getting a sample of it and you didn't even know it. You had no idea that you were getting some type of sample of how possibly the ancient Hebrew sound. All right. I'm sorry, somebody have anything? I can barely hear you. Can you speak up a little bit?
Yes, can you hear me now?
You're a little too low, Minister White.
Oh, how about now? It's better?
That's a little better.
It's a little better? Okay.
Hold on, let me make sure. Oh, it probably was me. I had my volume down. Sorry. Go right ahead, please.
I'm already screaming. No, just kidding. What I wanted to mention is about when you said that the word for Torah is an arrow hitting the mark. I wanted to highlight, just like sin is an arrow missing the mark.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to add that piece to it. Thank you, Brother Angel.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that is so true. That's the key then. So sin is missing Torah or deviating from Torah because it's really about deviation if you understand what sin is. Mm-hmm. When somebody shoots an arrow and they don't hit the center, they deviate from the center, right? They measure the distance from the center to see how accurate it is. That's the idea when they talk about shooting the arrow. It's the degree you miss, not the fact that you just missed. It's how much you miss. So sin is not just absolute right or wrong. There is a degree of sin. And you can't get that without understanding the Hebraic definition. I'm telling you, you miss out. If there's a Christian person in the audience, you miss out not studying from a Hebrew perspective. All right, let's continue. Bantu, asa, still in process. Hebrew, asa, to do or make. Bantu, ikaba, uneducated someone who simply follows another. And in Hebrew, akad, to take by the heel, follow at the heel. All right? Bantu, kata, to cut. In Hebrew, katab or chatab, to cut or gather. Bantu, itzi, wood or tree. And in Hebrew, itzi, tree, wood, or timber. Hard to argue with those, right? They're pretty obvious. Bantu, Nabi, prophet. Hebrew, Nabi, spokesman, speaker, prophet. Bantu, Saba, 7. Hebrew, Sheba or Shaba, which is probably more correct because the E sound is not native to Proto-Hebrew. And that is for the number 7. Minister White, I never thought of this, but I noticed when I saw Sheba, I said, like the Queen of Sheba. And the number, yeah, the number 7. So her name was like the number 7. I thought about that when I saw that. Just to give you a sample of some of the languages in this Bantu family, you have the Yoruba, Igbo, Swahili, Hausa, Congo, are all Bantu examples. That's a huge area. It's bigger than the United States. That's how big. Just those few names. There's more than that. I didn't even say them all. I just gave you some. Let's continue. We have Bantu. Prophet is Nabi. Oh, I did that already. I'm sorry, didn't I? Did I click it? There you go. All right, Bantu. Kanuka. To inscribe, to anoint, to invoke. Convocation. The weekly Sabbath. By the way, the weekly Shabbat. Hebrew. Hanukkah. Dedication. Consecration. Come on, people. You have, how can you argue that one? Bantu, Takana, death coming. Hebrew, Takana, does not appear that this one you cannot find in the Tanakh. It's not in the Bible, but it's still a Hebrew word, which means danger. Trust me, if death is coming, it must be dangerous, whatever it is. All right. You have something?
No, I'm just laughing at what you said. That's all.
Oh, okay. Let's keep going. I told you. There was so much I found. I just had to enjoy myself and put it all in here. Bantu, Mawara, a place of a hole. Hebrew, Meora, a cave. Bantu, Negewo, which is metal mines. Now, the V sound in the modern word Negev would have either been Nagab, or how should I say? It would have had the W, the Wa instead of a Va sound. So it would have still been very, very similar to the Bantu. And this was considered the location of Beersheba in Scripture. This was the name of the southern region of Israel. The name dates from biblical times, and the area was known for its copper mine. This is where the words gets associated with the metal mine.
Are you saying or either implying maybe that the Queen of Sheba was from one of the tribes of Israel?
What I'm implying only here, because I don't know the history well enough, is that this location was used as a name for a southern region of Israel. I don't know if I put a map in here or not, but I will tell you the book and who makes this statement later on. It's an Israeli scholar quotes it as this. But if I have made an error, though, I will always tell the audience and as well as anybody on the call, make sure you point it out to me and I'll correct it in our follow-up lesson. But this is what I believe he said in his book, and I will quote the book and the author and further information from his book because it's absolutely fascinating. His story is fascinating. I'm hoping to get to it. because he found these languages by mistake. Total accident. Can you imagine a Jew, been a Jew, all his family's Jew, everybody's Jewish in his world, comes to Africa and randomly picks a language to study. And it took him forever because it was one of the languages that had syllables like koko, kake, ki. And he ends up studying it, not knowing what he was studying was a Proto-Hebrew language. He found it out as he started to get to understand it. It's a really interesting story, interesting book. So I'll bring that book up a little bit later.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. The Bantu, kebati, make big beats. Then you have the Hebrew kabat, which is to beat off, out, or thresh. Then you have the Bantu sufa, is a storm. And you have the Hebrew supa or sufa, a storm. All right. Bantu word, kol selah, weak legs. In Hebrew, is kashal or koshel, which is to totter or waver through weakness of the legs. I believe I got this one on here twice by mistake. I'm sorry. Sufa and Sufa on here, which was on the previous screen. So sorry about that. Try to catch the mistakes, but sometimes I miss them. I apologize. Don't think I hit. Yeah, see, it's still on here. So I don't know why I got it on here. I must have really enjoyed that word. So please forgive me. We have matara in Bantu, which is place of going, and matara in Hebrew, which is an aim, mark, or target. There I go. Got it right on the next slide. All right, Bantu. You have Nasi, lead people or leader. Then you have the Hebrew Nasi, a chief, a leader, a president. Then you have Bantu, which is the Tamil word for has rightness. And then you have the Hebrew word Tama or Tam or Tom, which is taste or flavor. I do actually. I have a book coming up next. That's good. And I have Nasi again. Don't know why. I guess I was working with multiple slides. So again, I apologize. But the one I found here was pretty cool. Is the Bantu Mitat-Toran. My name is in him. Hebrew Mitatron, found in the Talmud, known as the archangel who had the name of Yah in him. That is Exodus 23, 20, and 21. Let me see, I have it right here just to read it. And it reads, Behold, I send an angel before thee to keep thee in the way and to bring thee into the place which I have prepared. Beware of him and obey his voice, provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. In the Talmud, that's what it describes that angel as, the archangel name as Metatron. For some reason, Bantu language all the way over here on the western coast of Africa has this word, Mitatoran, which means my name is in him. How can you wipe this out? How can you ignore this? You cannot. So these were just some of the language similarities. So many you can't believe. But I wanted to grab some where that was very easy and pretty straightforward to give you a good example of how the Bantu languages has way too many similarities, too many similarities. And for example, with the Metatron word especially, a word that long and a word that complicated, to have the possibility of showing up on two different locations that are thousands of miles away is so extremely remote to be a random occurrence. that it's just not something that they could feasibly say that could just remotely happen. They just don't see that. Not with the same pronunciation and meaning. You just don't see that. Then the people will say, well, they speak this because there were Jewish explorers or something like that, or some type of conversions or anything like this. The problem they have, this was a remote tribe that was never colonized. The group that this comes from, and we're about to talk about them next, was isolated and enemy. They were never colonized. They were never given British or European names. They never spoke any English or any French. They kept the tribal language. So that means that this is true to their native tongue, what they're speaking. They did not have European influence. All right?
I have a question.
So anybody have any questions or anything?
Yeah,
yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
I have a question. I want to ask you about the Hebrew word nasi, where it says H5387. You see it? Nasi. And then 2 words down, it's Hebrew again, but it's not nasi, it's mitatran. Is it because it's found in the Talmud and not in our
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well,
correct.
Okay.
That's one of the things about strong numbers. Strong numbers are meant to reference scripture only. They don't do it to help you study Hebrew.
Okay.
It helps you study the Hebrew of the Bible. So when they're not in the Bible, there's no strong number for it. That's a good question. Thank you.
One more comment. I want to put in like a disclaimer, if that's appropriate, if that's the right word. Even though you have shown us the various words, how they are related throughout the languages, we are not advocating anyone to go and pick up the Talmud to begin to read it. We are just simply revealing to you how we have found the similarities in a language, and in the Talmud, it's happened to be one of the locations we found this word Middletron, which is very close to the other languages. So just in case any newcomers are listening to this in the future, we're not advocating the reading of the Talmud at all. We're just trying to show you in various places there are found the same words or extreme similarities. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you, Brother Andrew.
You're welcome. That is true. The reason why the Talmud, I don't read the Talmud either, and because we know its source, its origin, and what problems it has caused for our ancestors. What was useful about the Talmud is that this word is found in something that's extremely old. So it dates back to the original Proto-Hebrew time period when it was used. So it just demonstrates that there's a historical proof that this word existed prior to any of the Ashkenaz influence or the European Jews' influence. That's the only reason this is referenced. Other than that, I don't mess with it. I don't mess with it. All right. Oh, you're welcome, Minister. No problem. Okay, so let's get into that book. Let's take a look at a map here. This map we're going to talk about is from that book, and I'm going to tell you what the book is. What's important here is that this book is written by an Israeli scholar, and he drew this map discussing the wanderings of the the wanderings of the Hebrews after they left Egypt for 40 years in the wilderness. And this is the path that this Jewish scholar said the Israelites took, the Hebrews took in the 40 years of wandering in Africa. You will find the name of these nations in the book of Numbers, chapter 33. And I'm sorry I couldn't get it bigger for you to see it better. So I would tell you all to take a good picture and you can blow it up. But I also will provide you the book that you can Google or pull it from an archive yourself as well. Okay? But this is the path, and it's interesting. They go all the way to the west, all the way to the Niger area. north and south. That's very important because we've already talked about that in the previous part of this lesson. That the Hebrews were known to be above and below the Niger River. This is Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Nigeria, Benin, Ghana, Congo, Sierra Leone, all of that. All of that is up in there and more. Ivory Coast and all that. Isn't that peculiar that he follows the very path that we've already discussed in the previous parts of this lesson series? So I just wanted people to see that this comes from this gentleman's book. All right?
Brother Andrew.
Yes, ma'am.
You know what's even more peculiar to me? Is that this area that you just mentioned, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, Nigeria, those areas, right now, those areas are a hotbed. That's just a phrase I'm using. These same areas that we're speaking of right now that were a hotbed back then, we're back in these areas again. They are in hotbed again. Remember, King Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. What was will be again. Do you not think that what was is trying to be again? These areas there's upheaval in these areas again. I don't think it's a coincidence that as we're living in these last days, these very areas have come into focus just as they were when it was time for Yah to spank, I call it Yasharel, and for the diaspora, the dispersion to take place. Here we are again, looking down the face of a second Exodus, and now there is a shaking, a turbulence, if you will, in these areas as we exist today. I think it's phenomenal. So it's a wonderful time to be alive.
I do too. I find what's going on in Africa very exciting because it is a global changer. And many people who are asleep in Christianity and the religion that do not want you to understand the truth, because the people of Israel is the timepiece of the world. They are the ones that tells you what's coming. You have to know the people of the book. The Christianity tells you it's not important. That is one of the greatest lies of the religion. You know who the people are, then you know what prophecy the Bible is speaking of. If you don't know the people, you're lost. All you got to do is pay attention to the people. And when you see and you know the region that this stuff is happening in is God's people, this is bananas. In South Africa did this as well, by the way. It's a fascinating time. Understand, you're talking about the largest landmass in the world with millions and millions and millions of Yah's people in there. You can fit nearly every European nation and some Asia nations in Africa. And they are all standing up against the Western colonial history that they've been under. It's a game changer. Big game changer. All right. By the way, audience,
I have a question.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me make this quick statement, Minister Ronnie, and you can have the floor. For the audience, take a screenshot of this with your phone or something with your tablet so you can have it because you're going to need it for the next screen. So go right ahead, Minister Ronnie.
Well, so it's going to take you longer than that. I apologize. Yeah. What do you say? Looking at the hot spots on the map that you guys just pointed out over in Africa, what would you say to the people that's been taught to keep their eyes on Israel? What would you say to them right now? Oh, pick me.
Go right ahead, Minister.
I would say, first of all, go back in 1948 when we were told that Israel returned to their land in 1948, and that the people that you see in the state of Israel today are supposed to be This is what we were told. The collection of Yasharel. But since we know that they are not Yasharel, that means that the scripture where Yahuwah had said he would gather his people and bring them back into their land hasn't happened. So what do you see going on right now over in the continent of Africa and in Europe? There is a major shaking going on. You're beginning to see people leaving and going back to their own land. That's just the beginning. So I would say keep your eyes on the true children of Yasharel over in the countries of Africa. But also, a major piece of them are in the United States. Keep your eyes on these countries because these are prominent players in the game that's afoot. That's what I would say. What would you add, Brother Andrew?
I would say 100%. What you just said. 100%. If I was an honest person, a truthful person, I will have to ask myself a couple of questions. One, does the state of Israel line up with Scripture? Because they would have to be at peace if they were truly returned back to their homeland, and they're not. Two, looking at where Israel roamed, you're telling me who you see in Israel today could have done this map? Do we know what this region looks like today? Especially that northern region? Largest desert in the world. And they went through that mud and came around. Now, if you know how many people left that region, and many people would have stayed back, settled, done a couple of things throughout this travel, why don't we see white Jewish historical settlements in Africa? In the heart of Africa, I'm talking about in the middle of this month, you don't see, there's not one. Logic, people, common sense. There is no way the people who say they are who they are could have been who they say they are. They don't match up. It doesn't work out. It doesn't work out. So I'm in agreement with you. There's a lot of people that need to pay attention.
They could not have survived the weather would not permit them to have survived the journey. And the time frame that was spent marching around throughout. Remember, it says that Yasharel wandered in the desert for 40 years. Can you imagine the people that are in the state of Israel now being in the Saharan desert, in the hot sun?
That's the point I'm making. Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine them being in that weather for 40 years without air conditioner? You have the shelter of your tent, but it's without air conditioner.
They couldn't even expose their nose. You understand that? They couldn't even put their nose out.
Sure.
And you're going to tell me?
The thing is, it's sunblock back then. There was no sunblock.
No.
There was, yeah.
No.
Okay.
Well, we all know that sunblock was created for them and not for us.
Exactly.
It was created for them when they created it. So what we've been taught again is what we have been taught again about the church is the untruth. Putting it politely, because they've taught us to keep our eyes on the wrong people. Now, the question would be, why would you put a certain group of people over there back in 1948 and tell us to keep our eyes on them when you know that they're not the ones from Abraham's seed, the Shem, the chosen ones, the Israel, the 12 tribes, Yahudah being the firstborn. But why would you tell us to look at those people when they're not any of those? But what was the point? Excuse me, I would like to answer, right?
I would like to answer that.
Mm-hmm.
The point is this: if Yasharel, true Yasharel, is the time clock. It's Yahuwah's time clock, right? Then what are those individuals over there? Whose time clock are they? So if you're watching them, then you're watching the wrong clock. If you're watching the wrong clock, then you don't know what time it is. You understand the way I'm saying it? That's why they say, keep your eyes on Israel, the state we're talking, the people that are over there in the state. Keep your eyes on them. They are about to build the third temple. The Messiah is about to come to that temple. Things are about to happen. The Antichrist is about to come over there. So everyone's eyes is focused to the left, looking at someone else's time clock, which is not Yahuwah's, when they should be looking at true Yasharel, which is Yahuwah's time clock. And when you see things happen with them, that's when you know he's moving. That's when you see the cloud moving from up over the tent, moving forward. That's when you see the pillar of fire moving. And that's when you know it's time for Yasharel to move. And when it's time for Yasharel to move, that means it's time for other nations to move out the way. You watch that time clock so you can be caught off guard. So keep looking at the wrong one. That's what I think.
I agree with that. I agree. Very good. Thank you. All right. Now, audience, you took a picture of this. Let's move to the next slide real quick. These are the locations in Numbers 33 and on that map, and the renaming of that map, those locations. And you will see these locations on that map. So I would say take a screenshot so you can understand the correlation and the changes. All right? And then on the next screen, we're going to talk about the source of all this. You'll find, just to give you an example, I got a few notes here for you. For Pid-Hahirat, you'll find in Numbers 33, verse 7. All right? And Mara is verse 8, and Elam is Alima in verse 9. And Alaso is Alush in verse 13. And Risha is Risha in verse 21. You know, what's interesting is that all the wandering in the wilderness happened in Africa, far into it. I always assumed it was right near the northeastern region still, maybe in southern region, or they call it Upper Egypt, into Nubia. That's what I thought. I didn't realize they traveled all the way west like that. All right? Just so future ref, you can take a picture of this and take the two and just take a look at both for your own reference, so you can take a look and be fascinated about this. Now let's talk about the author behind all this information. Yes, ma'am.
I want to ask a question, please.
Sure.
Are you saying that when they traveled all the way west, did they actually travel to the areas where in the future they end up being dispersed to or running to when they left in 70 AD? Did they go that far into the west?
Yeah. They literally traveled into every place you find in that term. So what he will argue and say is, as they travel through, some stay behind and settle. I mean, you might have a few bits and pieces of that, maybe. But for what we understood is that there was a purpose behind going in the wilderness for 40 years. Those who disobeyed, those who had no faith, those who had no loyalty to God, died in those 40 years. So having something left behind, I don't know about that. But that's his argument.
I'll tell you this. The reason I ask is because when Moses ran from Egypt, when he killed one of the Egyptians, so he ran, and he ended up being with the priests of Midian, right, in those areas, you'll find that those locations where he was with that family is the areas where the children of Israel, when they left Egypt, during the first Exodus,
Yeah.
Moses was taking them through those areas. He knew those areas like the back of his hand because he'd already been there.
Yeah.
He'd already been through those areas, those mountains and stuff. He'd been there. I just think it's odd that Yahuwah took our forefathers through there because we have to go back again. Just like Moses had to go back again to get the children of Israel and then take them back. So we have to go back again too. And I think there's going to be a witness in those of us who go back when the time comes that we've been there before. There'll be a feeling of belonging and comfort that I think we'll experience something we've never felt before. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I didn't think of it that way, but that's true. The reason where a lot of the descendants of Israel are at right now are in the same path that they took. That's interesting. All right. Here's the author, Joseph Heidelberg, and that's a 1954 picture of him. He wrote the book Bambara, a Proto-Hebrew language, and he wrote it in 1977. He was a Jewish-Israeli military commander as well. Became a linguistic researcher, scholar, and spoke 7 languages. Heidelberg studied the Bambara language found among the Bambara in Mali, north of the Niger. Heidelberg's research supported that the Exodus occurred in North Africa, moving all the way to Nigeria. He believed that the Bambara language came from Proto-Hebrew. Now, he supports his research with linguistic facts that are hard to refute, and a lot of those words we just went over was from his book, by the way. So we know that. What's interesting, like I was telling you, he did not come to, he had no idea there was Proto-Hebrew in Africa. He was just curious to find a new challenging language. And the Bambara language sounds, he said one of the hardest things to learn about this language, there was no text to help him. Very little text resources. But they will have a word, a sentence that will say something like, Olo, ko, ka, koko, te, ka, koko. They'll have 5 of the same words in it. And it will be the way and timing and all that to use that he would have to figure this out. Once he started learning the syllables of the language, he realized that he wasn't studying the initial language he thought he was studying, but he was studying Bambara. And then he realized that it's Proto-Hebrew. He was learning a language that was teaching him how Proto-Hebrew sounded, which was so different than what we consider modern Hebrew today. That's his own words. That's his own words. He was blown away. He was first, he felt he spent all that time studying the wrong language, and he got upset until he started realizing the Hebraic connection, and he made a huge discovery, all by accident. There was no intentions of him going to that part of Africa to simply study because he heard rumors. That was not his intention. What he wanted to do was study a language that was of African origin that had no colonial influence. That's what he did. He did that with purpose. What he did not know is that when he thought he was studying one type of language, it ended up being something totally different. The Bambara, which is a Bantu dialect, and it ended up being a Proto-Hebrew language. He says that, not me. This is the region. All right, this is the region he was of the Bambara. You'll find them in Mali, Ghana, Guinea, Burkina Faso, Senegal. The very region right now that's a hotbed that we were just talking about. All right, these are the nations that are above the Niger River, the very nations we've already spoken on in the previous lesson. See how different sources from history, from language, books of all kinds are supporting what we've already talked about. We're just building a witness on top of witness. All right. If there's no questions, I'll move to the next one. Any questions or anything anybody want to add?
We're good. Thank you.
All right. Let's read. Now, I got a lot of text here. All right. But I want you to understand, you may have a question and say, these languages are just coincidental. And I already talked about this somewhat. After reviewing the languages, can we say that they are coincidence? Let's see what Heidelberg had to say about this. In Heidelberg's examination of the language comparisons, he uses math to calculate the probability that two words that are the same appear in two completely different and unrelated languages with the same meaning. He says the longer the word, the more unlikely it will appear in both languages with the same pronunciation and meaning. In his conclusion, then, the Bambara language appears in Africa due to the Hebrews wandering in Africa, he believes, but to our understanding, and in most likelihood, it's just the exiles. They're just ones that wandered into Africa for their own safety. He says this here: the syllabological approach, studying the syllables, the individual pieces of the word, approach to the diachronic, which means the study of the concerns with the phenomena such as linguistic features, the features of the language, as they change through time. So he's saying the study of the phrases approach to how language or something changes over time should enable us to examine with a great degree of certainty the probability that a single word would be by chance find its way in the vocabularies of two unrelated languages. All right? So he's telling you this is how he approached it. All right? This is how he approached it. He said, this should imply that the chance of a certain word to have the same sequence of syllables arranged by speakers of two unrelated languages decreases as the number of syllables in that word increases. So you have what they call monocratic or monocratic, dicratic, tri, and tetra as the words get bigger, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. And he's saying that he kept finding long words that were the same in two different unrelated languages, supposedly. And they meant the same. He says that's mathematically, that doesn't line up. All right? Everybody following me?
Okay.
All right. We're going to continue. He says, the foregoing syllabological comparisons reveal with a great degree of probability that the Bambara and the Hebrews had been closely related in the distant past. And since the diachronic study, the study of how things change of the languages, can hardly be separated from historical implications, it follows that similar multisyllable words in two unrelated languages point to either direct or indirect relations between the speakers of the two languages in the very remote past. So he's telling you that these complicated words, these longer words, these multisyllable words in two unrelated languages, apparently, and they had the same meaning, same spelling, same pronunciation, either were because they were directly related with the same ancestors or indirect. Either way, he's saying that the two languages come from the same ancestor somehow in the remote past. And when you read I'm trying to spare you some of his language because it's complicated, because he uses axiomatically diachronic permutations and agglutination. I don't want to bore people with words that are not in the normal circles. He is a scientist when he took this approach. This was not a sloppy approach, because you got to understand he's a Hebrew-speaking Jew. who just realized that a black person is speaking a version of his language that predates his. So this person has an ownership to something that he can't speak to, and it predates his people.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got to approach this study very carefully.
And Brother Andrew,
And he does. He's meticulous with it. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. I just want to say, and it's really important that you highlight this aspect because it shows that this is not a biased approach, just in case someone could be contemplating that. So your statements are actually clearing that up, just in case anyone might think that is true.
Yes, this was a major find in my research. This is huge because this man is accredited. This man is accomplished. This man is intelligent. For him, who is an established Jewish man of the state of Israel, to admit that an African nation has Hebrew, a Proto-Hebrew that predates his own, is substantial. It's really substantial.
Mm-hmm.
Elderberg further said about what he further said about the Bambara language on page 33. Said that this is how it impacted him. Just to show you, he said, slowly and to my great excitement, I began to discover a remarkably interesting fact. If at first I thought I was studying, this is the language he thought he was studying, a viola. All right, and later I thought that the same language was Bambara. It became clear to me by then, to my great astonishment, that what I learned was the ancient Hebrew language. It is not like the Hebrew language that we speak today, but it retains a sizable vocabulary that left no room for any doubts in his mind. This man had no doubts in his mind that the Bambara language of Mali was a Proto-Hebrew language. He had no doubt. You have to be quite convincing to convince a Jew that a black African that lives inland and never was colonized, so it did not have the white history, to convince this Jewish scholar to make a statement like this is extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I just wonder in Zephaniah, in Zephaniah chapter 3 and verse 9, it says, "For at that time I will change the speech of the peoples to a pure speech, that all of them may call upon the name of Yahuwah and serve him with one accord." I'm just wondering if the language that he's referring to, this ancient Hebrew language, could be the language that is being spoken of in Zephaniah chapter 3. That's just a question. I'm not saying it is. I'm just wondering.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
I'll have to look at that later. That would be interesting. Anything else? Anybody else?
Mm-mm.
All right. Oh, all right. So we have talked about language. We've talked about history. We have talked about many things. We talked about how Yahia ben Rabbi, the Negro. We talked about Oleuda Equiano, the slave that had his autobiography he spoke about some traditions in Torah and he didn't even know it. We talked about the Limba Bantu speaking people of South Africa, the Igbo, the Negroes and Hebrews and Bantu languages, many, many historical and the Bambara and on and on and on. There are many sources you could find in history, and a great place to begin your understanding of this history is in the Reclaiming the Throne series. That will help anyone who really wants to understand. I love that series. I've watched it multiple times. and you can find it free on Tubi. It's phenomenal.
It is
phenomenal. If you love that one, you'll like Ron Dalton's DVDs as well. He has Hebrews to Negro, Wake Up Black America, and he has Hebrews to Negro 2, Revelation, the Age of the Awakening, and he has his third one coming out, I believe, in a month or so. And those are great series that speak a lot of history, a lot of data, a lot of DNA, all kinds of interesting facts for you. Okay?
And I
think this is a good point to stop. Oh yes, ma'am. Go right ahead.
I just want to mention that the things you just mentioned about the Wake Up Black America by Ron Dalton and Reclaiming the Throne. Is it by Benaiah Yisrael? No, it's not. No, it's by Rebirth of a Nation, I think. Rebirth of a Nation.
Rebirth of a Nation, it is. Mm-hmm.
Rebirth of a Nation. Do not be hesitant.
Yep.
Do not
Rebirth
be hesitant.
Of a Nation.
Yeah, to watch those. Why? Is because they are loaded with nothing but facts, not conjecture. Facts, things that you can put your fingers on. Things that you can, that you can, how they say, touch, taste, smell. So when you hear what's being said, you can't say that's their opinion. It's far from that. And it's worth a watch. I just wanted to add that, Brother Andrew. Go ahead, please.
I 100% agree with you. When I tell you the thoroughness of the research, it's extraordinary. And it's eye-opening, it's startling, it's sad, it's amazing. And I hope that people that watch it will allow themselves to learn truth. Even if you're not part, or you thought you were, or your changing of your mind is overwhelming in some people's lives because it's life-changing. What matters most is that I pray that anybody that's in this lesson today seeks the truth. All I've shown you is historical facts. This is none of my opinion. I provide my sources, just like B'nai Israel does, the Awakening Remnant Coalition with Moreh Yeshayahu Ben Israel, the Ron Dalton, Rebirth of a Nation, all these guys. What's his name? There's another one too. Oh man, and he has a website loaded with stuff. It will come to me later. I'm sorry, audience. He's fantastic too. But I will tell you.
Oh, is it Dante?
It's worth every bit. Dante Fortson.
Yes.
Fortson?
Dante, yes.
Yep, that's him. Yep, that's him. Thank you. Yes, he's a wealth of knowledge as well. His story is interesting. Dante Fortson. If you look him up, his story is this. He created his Black History website to debunk the Hebrew Israelite movement. It wasn't to support them. It was to debunk them because he was a devout Christian who believed that the white Ashkenaz or the white Sephardic Jew was the true people. He had no belief in the Hebrew Israelite movement. By the time he got into it deeply, he realized that his research wasn't telling him that. And it caused his eyes to be opened. Now the website is dedicated to support waking up the Hebrews, the true Hebrews of the Bible, and bring their identity to them. So we're going to stop here because the next section of the lesson is the visual history, the pictures and the maps that support who Israel looked like, what they looked like, and who they were. So I thank you all for joining the House of Shiloh Ministries and our part 22 of the FAQ series. Please join us again as we get into some visual history, which I think people will find very fascinating as well. So shalom, everyone, and please join us again next week.
And we know we've given you a lot of information. If you feel the need to talk and you want to ask some questions, feel free to email us at info@houseofshiloh.org. info@houseofshiloh.org. And we'll get back to you as quickly as we can. With that being said, shalom.